Welcome to the Filmcast review of Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. I'm going to read the plot summary from IMDb. Many years after the reign of Caesar, a young ape goes on a journey that will lead him to question everything he's been taught about the past and make choices that will define a future for apes and humans alike, end quote. Joining us for this review of Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, she is a TV critic at vulture.com. She's been my frequent co-host at Decoding TV and also one of my favorite people on the internet. Roxana Hadadi, welcome back to the Filmcast.
Woo!
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Very kind. Thank you.
Great to have you, Roxana. My sense was you wanted to talk about this movie, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. Were you a fan
Yes.
of the last three movies, kind of the modern Apes movies?
I love the modern Apes movies, like fully, completely. I think in particular, the latter two are great. And that has sort of shaped how I feel about this one. But, we'll get there. We'll get to that point.
The last two directed by Matt Reeves.
Matt Reeves.
I think it's frequently thought of as the Reeves trilogy, even though he only did numbers 2 and 3, right?
It's like a Born Identity
right,
situation.
Born Identity situation.
Mm-hmm.
Rupert Wyatt did the first one.
It's a rounding up thing.
Yeah, rounding up.
Round up.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
2 out of 3 counts.
Yeah, it's yours.
So, Roxana Hadadi, so curious. After many, War for the Planet of the Apes felt like a definitive end for the apes in the modern era, but studios these days, they've got to go back into the IP mines to get some. The cupboard is nearly bare. They need to use what they have. Yeah. So, into the modern age emerges Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. What did you think of this movie overall?
I tweeted that I thought Koba would have hated it, and that's sort of how I live my life. Would Koba like it or Koba not like it?
Absolutely, yeah.
And I have very mixed feelings on it. I think they mostly skew negative. I think that it sort of loses both the spirit of the previous trilogy, and I'm not sure that as a way to start a new trilogy, this entirely succeeds. So I have a lot of character issues. I have a lot of overall theme issues. And I'm unconvinced about whether this has remained a trilogy or a film about the apes. I think there are too many humans in this movie. That's my
right.
main
Well, it's
complaint.
definitely not a trilogy anymore, right? It's now a quadrilogy or whatever.
Beginning of a new trilogy.
Or a new trilogy.
Yeah. I think they said they wanted to make 9 films, is it? Or 7 films, right?
Sure.
Oh, that's too many.
I mean, talk about a property that you could milk forever, though. Like, make it closer to the older movies, come up with new ideas. Yeah, a lot of things you could do.
All right. So kind of mixed, sounds like, Roxana.
Yeah.
Kind of mixed feelings on it.
That's a nice way to put it. I think I was more negative than that, but we'll go with mixed. Yeah.
All right. Devindra Hardawar, let's hear your thoughts on the new Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes movies.
Sure. Apes together long. That's what I feel about this thing. It is a perfectly cromulent adventure movie. Like, that's the thing. I think it's an interesting story. The characters are intriguing. There's some decent set pieces. It looks really good, although I think at times it does not look as good as Dawn of the Planet of the Apes or War, especially because there are more CG environments here, like more stuff that don't actually exist. So when the characters are leaping and moving and fighting around, it just feels more like, oh, I'm watching like a Marvel CG scene here and not like something that is trying to feel like a grounded ape existing in a real environment thing. So that kind of bothered me. I think the problem is we just watched War. And I think War of the Planet of the Apes is a freaking great movie, like a masterpiece of a film that didn't get enough love at the time and probably should definitely get more love soon. On a character level too, like I have just issues. I think Noah, who is the new protagonist, is fine, but he is sort of like the boring YA protagonist that even like Luke Skywalker was in the first Star Wars. Like he is just guy set on hero's journey, having very, very stereotypical things happen to him. Like the whole journey feels like we've been here before. It doesn't feel like this movie is actually engaging with like the concepts of how the original Apes movies were also reflections of humanity and how we've treated the world and how we exist as a society. There are inklings of it here. I think it is trying to do something, but every time it does, it feels like it pulls back a little. I think like the actors are fine. Kevin Durand in particular, who plays Proximus Caesar, is fantastic, but he is fantastic in one scene.
Kevin Durant, by the way, having a great spring. He was also in Abigail.
Good time for him.
Did a great job in that movie as well. So, I thought he was wonderful in this movie, Kingdom.
Have a great
Way.
spring. That's what we wish for all actors.
Absolutely.
All actors.
Have a great spring.
I mean, he's been in things forever. Like he was in Lost, right?
Yeah.
X-Men Origins Wolverine. Like Kevin Durant's getting his time now.
Great
I interviewed him.
face.
I think I interviewed him for Warcraft. Wasn't he in Warcraft?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Jeff Kanata, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. What do you think?
Well, Dave, I guess you could say what I think of Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is best summed up in the form of a limerick.
All right, let's hear it, Jeff.
Our heroes get into some scrapes. Big action and daring escapes. It's so much more fun than the previous one. But do I root for the humans or apes?
Always the question.
I thought you were going to zig, instead of zagging and rhyme something else with it.
But that was a zig because you thought I was going to zag.
It's come full circle now.
That's right.
Doing
I
the
clearly
convention.
can't drink the one in front of me.
As this movie did.
I think I liked it more than anybody who's spoken so far. But I do recognize some of the same problems. I genuinely don't know what this movie's position is apes v humans.
Yes.
And we'll get to more of that during spoilers. But I do think that's an issue. Like I kind of don't know what this movie is trying to say in that regard. Yeah. That said, I did enjoy the scope and scale of this. I enjoyed the world building. I mean, it really does. There's a brief period at the beginning of the movie that kind of links it to the last film, but it really is much farther in the future than we've been thus far, and kind of carving new territory as far as what them apes been up to, you know. And I thought that was pretty fun. The notion of how they live now, what their cultures are. I think ultimately, I don't think this is a spoiler to say. I think that thematically, it really is, interestingly to me, saying no matter how good your intentions, Caesar from the previous three movies, no matter how noble your intentions, no matter how clear you seem to think you are about what you want for goodness and hope, your words will be just twisted around. It's like every religion. It's like everything that's ever happened in history. The people who are trying to do good, some bad people can still use their name. And I think that to me is a really cool theme, like a very a neat way to use sci-fi to speak about the world, which is what sci-fi is for, right? In my opinion, I think sci-fi works best when it's making it is a metaphor for something in the real world. And I think that to me made this movie worthwhile, is this like notion that, on a long enough timeline, even the best of intentions can get mangled. And along the way, we're into some really, I think, fun adventure stuff. And while I admire the previous movies, there's nothing very fun about them, right? And that's fine, right? That's not what they were trying to do. But I had fun with this movie, and I enjoy having fun. So I had a great time with this movie. I agree with.
I hate fun, by the way. So
yeah, we all hate fun.
We're all very well aware of that. I agree with Devindra that it's shocking that 7 years later, I don't think this movie looks as good.
Yes.
That is truly a shock to me.
Does not look as good as War for the Planet of the Apes.
Right.
In terms of visual effects.
Just pure believability of the characters on screen as existing in the real world.
Yeah.
It's a step back from that.
I think a part of that, by the way, is in War for the Planet of the Apes, many shots in that movie had humans interacting with apes. And it is a much lower percentage of shots in this movie that had that. And so when you have humans in the shot, there's certain things you need to make it look more real because they're actually often shooting humans on an actual physical set of some kind. That's my theory.
I mean, maybe
one of the things,
part of it, but I would say any given close up of Caesar from War
true.
from the Planet of the Apes is more believable to me than any given close up of any of the characters in this movie.
Yeah.
But
I feel the same
that could be a function of time spent, money spent,
right?
Budgeting and scheduling, and who knows? But it is something that is noticeable to me.
I agree.
So,
I agree.
Yeah.
All right, I'll say a few quick thoughts. Then we have a lot to discuss in spoilers. But I might have liked it more than all of you. I think.
Wow.
Look. There's some problems with this movie. We're gonna get into them, but I loved the action scenes. I thought every action set piece was really, really well done. And that is refreshing in today's day and age to see like really well thought through action scenes of big scale and scope on the big screen. Not a given anymore. Like some of the stuff that you see on the big screen these days can look like garbage. And a lot of it looked pretty good in this movie. I also loved a lot of the ideas that Jeff brought up that the movie covers that we can get more into in spoilers. Yes, Owen, the main character, Noah, played by Owen Teague, right? Is he's not the greatest. But I think Proximus, played by Kevin Durand, is really awesome and formidable, and just like the performance kind of sells it. There's also we talked about how War for the Planet of the Apes, that movie is kind of divided up into two portions. There is a road movie, and then there's a prison break, basically. That's kind of War for the Planet of the Apes. There's a bit of it's kind of similar dynamic in this movie. There's a big portion of it that's road movie as well. But this road movie is much more enjoyable because there's like a sidekick character, right? In this one that's like pretty hilarious.
We'll get a sidekick later, but yeah.
Kevin Macon, I think, right?
Peter Macon.
He's
great.
Yeah.
I loved him.
He's wonderful in this movie. Yeah. So, and he delivers a lot of the comic relief in the film. So I had a great time with this movie. I also have all of the same problems you guys have with it. But as a movie experience, I was engaged the whole time. It was thrilling, and it brings us back to this world that I think is just pretty fascinating overall.
It is amazing they're still making Apes movies, Yeah. So hey,
by the way, it was 9 movies that they had said they had planned out, including it's the same.
7's a dumb number, Dave.
It's the same husband and wife, like the same husband and wife couple that wrote the first Dawn. Like they're still working on the Apes movies now, and they had planned out a 9 movie arc when they did that, and they're like, this is never going to happen, but they're already on movie 4, so who knows? If
you walked into any executive's office in Hollywood and laid out a plan for 7 movies, they would throw you right out.
But 9.
Where's the other 2 movies?
I need to fill box sets, okay? Trilogies of box sets.
But anyway, so and certainly we'll cover this more momentarily, but certainly this movie sets up the next. I think
how could it not?
The idea is these characters are going to be part of a trilogy of movies.
Yeah.
I'll say one last thing before we get the spoilers, which is that one of my favorite sort of before the franchise became kind of a parody of itself. One of my favorite things about the Fast and the Furious franchise is that the character Han dies in Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift.
Spoiler.
Right? And then in the subsequent movies, they all take place between, until we got to the latter films, they all take place between Fast and Furious 2 or 2 Fast and Furious and Tokyo Drift, right?
And we just accepted it and we liked it. We accepted that happened.
The idea is that like sometime in the future, they're going to get to Tokyo, right? When Han dies, right? Sometime in the future. That they were able to drag that out for multiple films. And then obviously Han's adventures took a different turn in the last few movies.
Double spoilers. Yeah.
Now, I enjoyed like how strained that got over time. Like just how like there's this tension of like when are you going to get to Han dying in the Fast and Furious, and I feel like that tension also exists in these franchises where every single movie it feels like, or for many of the movies, like specifically every movie in the first trilogy with Rise, Dawn, and War, every single one of those movies ends in a place where the next movie could have been the original Planet of the Apes. Right?
Totally.
And
there's a number of times in this movie where people are looking up into space or into the sky, you know? And I kept waiting for there to be some sort of spapeship going by. And I honestly think that there's part of the plan here. I don't honestly think, but I think it would be funny if part of the plan here is that we're just biding our time until we can get a suitable enough digital Charlton Heston.
It's going to be Glenn Powell or Wyatt Russell or one of those folks, like just falling to earth, you know?
But it's just funny that happen. Like every one of these movies is like, it ends in a place. This time though, not really. But
I honestly, I think a really cool take would be, because we are now from the Apes perspective, like get the arrival of Charlton Heston from the Apes perspective. That would be kind of cool instead of it being from the humans perspective.
And never actually redo the first movie. Like get their perspective, have the first movie as canon, right? And then build it around
it can be like between, you know, the entire like 60s Apes movies can happen between
maybe not all of them.
Movies 7 and 8 in
it's
this
parallel. It's like Ender's Shadow, you know? I don't know if you guys know that book. It's like this was happening alongside the thing you already know.
All right,
that would be the way to do it.
Yeah, we'll see how it plays out. Let's get to spoilers. Spoilers for Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes starting right now. All right, now that we're in spoilers, we can finally actually talk about the plot of this movie. I thought they did a pretty good job of concealing the plot from the actual trailers.
Yeah, there are a lot of surprises, I think.
Yeah, so we learned that May, this character that kind of joins up with Noah's mission to seek down his clan, she is actually an advanced human that can talk. So that's like a big component of the movie. They happen upon Proximus Caesar's camp, where he is looking to unearth a cave full of human technology, right? In order to further rule the planet. Because while the apes now rule the world, their technology is much more primitive than what humans had back in the day. And, you know, along the way, they meet other human characters, like specifically William H. Macy plays a human who is helping the apes along. And, you know, that's how the rest of the movie plays out. I will say, by the way, I just watched the original 1968 Planet of the Apes movie this last week. I talked about it in an earlier segment of the podcast, but it is striking to me how much this movie borrows from that movie. They're like scenes that are like direct inspirations from that movie, like the scene where they're hunting down the humans, right? It's a analog 1-to-1 from the original movie.
The music even calls back to the
movie. The music calls back. The fact that it's like it culminates at this cave with human technology. You know, like a lot of callbacks to the original, which, you know, you may find either a nice homage or unoriginal, depending on how
a beach plays a big prominence, right? It's in this movie.
I think it is very clearly meant to be an homage.
So, Roxana, what were some of the issues that you had with how the latter half of this film played out?
I just want to say that Jeff's read on it being a religious divide is what fascinated me the most about the movie. Like, I loved the idea, as Jeff said, that like 300 years in the future, we have taken these teachings and corrupted and manipulated them beyond measure. Like, I thought that was amazing. And then I don't understand why we killed off Proximus. When he could have been such a fascinating figure. Like, he could have been Noah's Koba, right? Like a figure who for 3 films or 2 films is a foil. So I think that
I didn't see a body, Roxana. I didn't see a body.
You're right.
Killed off
we
like
don't
a punk.
see a body. It's just a cliffside duel taken straight from Black Panther and put in this movie. But yeah, like that frustrated me. And I think we'll talk about this more broadly, obviously. But yeah, like, what am I supposed to think about humans in this movie?
Yes.
Like, I have gotten very used to hating humans. It's the best thing these films do. And I think that I'm sort of confused a little bit about the resistance that May is operating as part of, how they have managed to endure for this time period, what we're supposed to think about them and their goals. I don't want the movie to spoon feed me anything, but obviously, like, 300 years is a long time, and it just felt like the script allowed a lot of narrative gaps within that time period that I just did not care for. And like a perfect example is like, I'd love to know how Proximus became Proximus. Like, how was this his idea? Is he one in a long line of like Caesar wannabes who have manipulated the doctrine for themselves? Or is he just like one crazy guy? I don't know. Just a lot of the in between portions of how we got from war to this just felt lacking for me.
Yeah,
And Noah is not compelling. He's
Noah
like, you know, like he's
sucks.
fine.
He
but
doesn't
like,
suck.
I don't
He's
care about his
he's
journey.
one of those protagonists that just sits there and reacts to everything. Is the ultimate problem. The story happens around him rather than active participation from his part.
The movie tries to nod at this whole idea of, Noah needs to become more at one with his people, basically. It's kind of this vague, like, because his clan is one that trains falcons. And the idea is that he's kind of like either shitty at training falcons, or he's afraid of it. He doesn't really want to do it.
We don't know.
And
but we
Apes
see
as
him.
falconers is pretty rad, though.
Apes as falconers is cool.
The
That world
image
building
is
cool.
amazing.
Yeah.
Like him hunting for the eggs was probably the best, I thought, the best set piece.
We're introduced to him being a good climber. So like a good YA protagonist, right? He is better than the rest at certain things. But everything else, it feels like, I have conflict with my dad. Dad conflict. For no apparent reason, right? The dad seems like the birds like him. Seems like a nice guy. But he
When
comes
have
to
birds ever been wrong?
When have birds been wrong? He comes to his son. I guess he's a little tough on his son, but it's just like, it feels like manufactured drama that I have seen in dozens of these types of stories. And that's the sort of thing that like really started turning me off. Like, you took this character from a sort of Star Wars type thing and just put him here. He loses his village, right? His village is attacked. His father dies. His mother is captured. That stuff is just, it feels so unique. It feels so unoriginal when we're coming from the story of Caesar, right? Which I feel like every step of that whole journey was a surprise. I remember being in the theater for Rise of the Planet of the Apes, and the first time Caesar spoke, people like shot up in their seats.
Yeah.
Because like
it was
it's
a good
Andy
moment.
Serkis going like, no, or something like that. It was a very loud, bold things. And people were like, oh, this is this movie, right? Whereas this one's like, well, I guess his village is gone. So I guess he's going to go on this journey. I guess he's going to do this thing. So you take this character and you put him next to Freya Allen's May, who is baffling as a character. Who is she? What does she want? If her goal is to steal this hard drive, why is she just hanging out in this village stealing food? What was her plan to get to the beach?
Yeah,
Did she
it makes
just
no
luck
sense.
out?
She was clearly knew that Noah was trying to find Proximus, and therefore was like, the only way
This
I
was
stand
before.
This
all happened before.
The smartest thing that she could have done was to avoid apes entirely.
Yes,
and the idea that
entirely.
she's following them makes no sense whatsoever.
It makes no sense. And then by the end, by the way, then the movie like has a point where it's like, okay, oh, she is villain, she bad, and even then, it's like the movie doesn't commit to it.
Yeah,
you know, it's sort of like by the end, he's like, okay, we have an uneasy truth now. You just almost obliterated my entire family and civilization. I'll keep my eye on you. Keep my eye on you, lady.
I'll give you this meaningful pendant, which surely in a future movie you will look at and reconsider your actions. Like, shut up. Eagle Sun is who needed his own movie.
Yes.
Eagle Sun is a great character.
Well, I do think I don't have as many problems with Noah as it sounds like everybody else does.
I was just bored by him. That's just me.
I have huge problems with May as a character. And one of my biggest problems with May is that she becomes the protagonist. She comes in and just muscles her way into this movie, and all of a sudden the movie's like, oh, she's the one we care about most. And I was like, what? I didn't sign off on that.
I think she looked at Noah and was like, nobody cares about you, so I'm just gonna like take the story and move it along, buddy, because you're not doing it.
The movie assumes we care about the plight of the humans for a large portion of the third act, and I'm like, I was on board with not caring about you. Humans bad. don't like humans.
Apes together strong.
Humans, apes together strong.
Yeah.
Humans, apes have a new
humans
opportunity
humans
here.
tried to solve Alzheimer's, right? That was it. This was all because they wanted to fix Alzheimer's.
Right.
They ruined the civilization. By the way, we are doing this right now.
I know.
We are doing this insane genetic engineering right now. And we have no idea.
We're doing all the science fiction movies right now. All the
we're doing them all at once. We just decided we're doing
Terminator.
We've been doing them, and like none of them are cool or fun. Everything still sucks, but we're also just doing massive genetic engineering. We can talk about this eventually, but I do want to say that changing apes together strong to just together strong is when I quit this movie.
Oh wow!
I was like, this sucks. Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah,
it's a little too close to a certain bracelet that people, anyway. But back to May, because she's a problem. She's a problem. And
yes, she is a problem.
One of the things that I dislike so much is how it just hand waves away so many things. You know, we just hand wave Bill Macy's whole situation. Like he's been here. What? I need an explanation about that. Like, and hand waving away somehow. There is a pocket of humans that have preserved all knowledge such that she knows everything. Like, it's crazy to me that it's like many generations later, and yet she's behaving like it was yesterday that the humans
sounds like she's from today.
And apes have regressed, right?
Yes.
Like they don't know how to read anymore. Whereas don't they know how to do that in the Reeves trilogy?
They've lost. Yes, they do specifically say in that time apes could read these words, could read the books.
Right.
Like that is specifically mentioned.
So it's also just wild that like humanity would be totally still the same within these pockets, but apes who now rule the world have actually become dumber. That's just there's no reasoning for that.
It's weird. I will say that kind of falls to like, hey, that happens in human civilization too. Like we have lost knowledge over generations. The whole thing about cement or concrete that the Romans knew how to do, and we lost that for hundreds of years, potentially 1,000 years, I think. Again, the thing with May is if they had committed to her being bad, straight up bad, like being a bad guy in this situation, then we know, oh, these humans suck. These humans, this is actually a threat. This is not like, oh man, it's so great that humanity has survived. It's like, oh no. These humans have survived,
right? But
we can't have that. Yeah,
it plays it like we're super excited that they have the technology to reach each other. It plays it like we're in a different post-apocalyptic movie where the humans need to survive. And I'm like, what? But that's not been the case with these movies.
What we're doing here. By the way, the whole thing with the humans, I was tracking this throughout this movie. I was like, it's been a while since I've seen a person of color in this movie. Roving bands of feral people. All white feral people in this movie. You get to the end with the secret base and whatever. This movie just unloads. There's a brown person. There's a black person. There's an Asian person. They're all here. They're all here. We're equal. Don't worry about it. We just didn't want to show people of color being feral because the optics are bad. We just can't make that work as a movie. And that is also where I was like, oh, come on, movie. You have no balls. Like you don't have any courage behind your convictions to actually tell this story.
Wow.
That's another thing that turned me
I wanted, as soon as May is like behind them, like eating, like a feral animal, I wanted one of the apes to turn to the other one and go, where did she get such a fantastic tank top?
Yeah, I was like,
she has wonderfully fitted clothes.
Everyone's wearing loincloths, and she looks like she came out of like H&M for some reason.
Yes.
And no point, the whole time we see her, I'm like, those pants fit perfectly.
Yes.
The tank top is off the shelf. This is not a feral animal. No one would think this was a feral animal. And then especially when we see the feral humans, it's like, no, those look like people that are wearing pelts. You know, she is
they just figured out clothes. Yeah.
It's just such a weird.
Yeah.
We're just supposed to accept that. It's weird.
But I agree with you. I think the biggest failure of this movie is it doesn't reckon with the fact that May betrayed all the apes and possibly doomed them all to death in any meaningful way. And I Caesar at the end, as you said, Devindra, Caesar's just kind of like, well,
not Caesar, not Caesar. Or let's call him not Caesar. How about that?
Also, it's just like, water under the bridge, but I've got my eye on you, and it's like
it is very weird.
Really?
I also wish the movie allowed Proximus's position to be considered. Like
More
he's
explored.
played as the evil man, but he actually has a decent point. And I think that makes for much more interesting villains, because why shouldn't the apes have this technology? Like, why should it be? The movie is like, no, this is for humans only. And it seems to think that we, the audience, agree with that. And I'm like, why should I agree with that? Like, I agree that apes probably shouldn't have tanks. You know, that's not great.
Well,
but I don't think humans should have
anyone?
tanks. You know?
Yeah. Should humans? Probably not. Like that last conversation between Noah and May, where she is being like, humans deserve this. These were our thoughts. These were our technologies, whatever. And he's like, who cares? Like that is the crux of this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like the last 5 minutes. And I just think like if you had spread that out through the middle portion of this film, you would have had a lot more of a compelling understanding of like what you set up. Is it is Proximus right? Is Caesar right? Like where does humanity fall within that spectrum? And what I really don't grasp, and it felt like just messy storytelling, is like, so May does whatever, she betrays them all, she bounces. And then Proximus is the villain that they need to vanquish at the end. And that whole ending just felt very tacked on. Like the Eagle clan coming together to kill him. It was like, but did you not see who just did this to you?
It was kind of her fault. I mean, he did imprison everybody and wipe out the village, and also bad.
Yeah,
also bad.
Sure.
How much? In my opinion, a much stronger movie. This is just reinforcing what you already said, Roxana. I think a much stronger movie is, we have been in this village, and for some reason we are forced to go to this other place, and we come to this kingdom, and oh my gosh, this guy is creating a utopia.
Yeah.
This guy is doing, we meet him and he seems to be a great guy and he's awesome. And all he wants is more knowledge for the apes. And then we have the humans come in, and now there's actual internal conflict for our hero, Noah, of, wow, what's the right thing to do? Shouldn't the apes have this knowledge? And then we have this human woman who undermines all that and sabotages it. Like, let us live in that moral gray area. Let us try to struggle with the question of who should have knowledge, and let the menace of the kingdom, the top down rule be emergent and not immediately like, well, that's evil. Look at the evil man doing his evil things and forcing the people to pull on the chains. It just felt so simplistic and rather than nuanced. And I think it had an opportunity to be something even more interesting than it is.
This is an entertaining movie, but not a courageous one. And I think that's my disappointment, because the last few did things I had never seen before in blockbuster movies. And like we just talked about War and just how hardcore that movie goes, like how just straight up like depressing it can be at times. But even Dawn like did some amazing things. It just feels like at every opportunity to do something really interesting, this movie didn't do that. We get the one great scene of Proximus when they're like pulling the chains to open the thing and he's going, yes. And Kevin Durant is like really just giving it. And then we don't really get it. We get a dinner scene that's kind of interesting, but not another chance for Kevin Durant to really show what he's doing as this character either too. So like, don't give me the good stuff and then not do anything with it. Right. Like it kind of is very confused about what it wants to do.
There are a few moments of moral ambiguity in the movie. There's this moment when May needs to kill William H. Macy's character, whose name I don't even remember. That moment was given a lot of attention in the movie, and I'm like, what are you trying to say about this? Like, humans can succeed, but only at the cost of brutality?
Humans kill each other. Good apes are not supposed to, right?
Right. I guess.
Then no one grapples with the fact that they killed Proximus.
Yes.
Like that in and of itself is like, if we're talking about Caesar's teachings, you've already corrupted apes together strong, and you've abandoned ape, not kill ape. So what does Noah believe? And I think that's where the film also ends in this really confusing place. Like it just distills it to, he thought humans and apes should work together, which is also never what I thought those movies said. Yes. I thought the Matt Reeves movie said, humans, go do your own shit.
Leave us
alone.
Like,
apes will do their own shit. It is a separatist society. It is not a we live together in community society. So there's also just like this moral ambiguity at the end, but I don't think in a way that actually serves what the movie is trying to do.
Yeah,
I don't think this movie ever figured out the Noah character, because also by the end, the setup, it feels like very, very like really easy setup here. I've never been able to sing to these birds. By the end, he's singing to the birds. When did he learn that?
Well, he went through a very taxing event, Devindra Hardawar.
He did.
You know,
he
and
did.
that we all know that going through something hard is character development.
But that literally is YA character. You set up the conflict, right? Well, I guess I gotta fill this puzzle to complete this story quest. So we're gonna do this. It feels like nothing was earned. It just feels like, oh well, I did this because I had to do it as a YA protagonist, basically.
Okay, so let's just not fan cast, but kind of speculate a little bit. At the end of this movie, the idea is that the humans now have the ability. First of all, apparently humans with modern technology have been living underground this entire time, right?
We got bunkers.
They're in bunkers, and they've developed the technology to communicate with each other. My assumption is that all this stuff happens, like this entire the last trilogy, this movie, and probably the next 5 movies happened between Dawn of the Planet of the Apes and the original Charlton Heston Planet of the Apes, right? That's my assumption. But I guess like, are we? I don't know that this movie really makes me super excited to see. Like, I guess it's like, hey, humans are still alive and they can still fight with the apes, and it's like, well, we kind of already saw that in the last.
I'm not
3
interested.
movies. You know, so I'm kind of like, what is? It doesn't necessarily bring up new interesting possibilities for me.
What it could have done though is put some apes in some tanks.
100%.
Well, by the end of this movie, we could have been looking at future films where we're having ape fighter pilots and ape. You know, we could have had like a real war for the Planet of the Apes.
We had apes with machine guns in the last few movies,
right?
You know,
right. There was apes with machine guns in the first movie.
Yes.
So Roxana Hadadi, or rifles at least. Roxana Hadadi, what did you think of the ending? Like, are you enticed by future possibilities? What do you think?
I am not, and I have a forgive me if this is like a very stupid question, but I was like somewhat checked out post Together Strong. But so May's whole deal was she was getting this like disc, and they plugged the disc in, and they just put a message out over the satellite. Is it just like
they like
re-engage
the satellite, basically? Yeah.
Okay, but it wasn't like a secret.
No idea what those characters were doing there before they had the secret hard disk, because they all seem to be like working on those panels, but nothing is happening.
Well, I also like whoever is receiving the message. It's been sitting there.
They've just been sitting there
300 years. Like,
and that's what I don't understand. Like, what is the point of the message? Is it just to like reach the satellites together and unite them, or is it supposed to like magically fix the fact that humans can't speak? Like, it is very unclear to me what this message broadcast is actually supposed to do and accomplish.
I think
I think my answer is like, I'm not excited.
I was not excited either, because it does the idea is that humans can communicate over vast distances again, and they can coordinate and do stuff together. Don't know why maybe some of these humans didn't try like exploring before. Maybe the apes were just too covered. Do want to point out, like, if something crazy happens and like government is about to fall, we have bunkers like this today. And they mentioned in the movie that the government immediately receded into these bunkers and like tried to protect itself. So I can understand why the bunkers are there, but it's treated like a surprise, right? That, oh man, we see these people in bunkers now. They could talk to other people in bunkers. What's going to happen? We do see somebody come out in a full-on protective suit. So clearly it's like an isolated environment. So those folks can speak because they have not fully exposed themselves to the real world. But why is May okay? We don't know. There's a lot of stuff.
There's some small portion of people that were like immune to the disease that happened in like.
Maybe she was vaccinated.
The idea is that this simian flu killed everyone and then left some humans alive, but that even those humans eventually succumbed to having their intellectual faculties removed from them by a mutation of the disease. But apparently, generations later, humans are still can thrive and speak even with the disease. So who knows?
What are you eating in the bunkers? Like, how much of a fallout situation are we talking?
This is a pure fallout situation. Yeah.
Like a pure fallout situation. So yeah, like I really wanted us to like see into space and see something, understand why the telescope was important, get a grasp of, how large scale the storytelling was going to be. But I think something that I loved about the Reeves trilogy is that Caesar and his clan felt very specific. It did not feel like the story was going massively big. But I think ending with this like satellite broadcast in the sense that there's one bunker, so there are probably more bunkers, I think it just opens up a lot of questions that I have about how you expand this world. And I wasn't convinced by how they presented May or the bunker that expansion is something this specific creative team could pull off.
It's Rise of the Planet of the Humans.
Yeah.
Basically.
A few just random things I want to point out. I actually really, like I said, I really like the set pieces. The initial assault on the village I thought was really well done.
The climbing stuff, yeah.
Noah versus that like gorilla hench person of hench ape of Proximus at the end when he like manages to drown that guy. I thought that was like really
the whole sequence on the bridge is rad.
Yeah, like so there's a lot of like really cool sequences in the movie.
A lot of water stuff that was awesome.
I liked the reference to the Nova reference, almost like undoes the Nova reference from the last movie.
You're all just Novas to us.
Because it's like in war, it's like, oh, this character's name is Nova for some reason. And you're thinking, oh, that must be Nova from the original Planet of the Apes movie. So it's like, no, they're all Nova. Like it's
kind of funny, actually.
We're gonna reset it, like we're gonna undo that extremely clunky.
So the reason her name is Nova in the original Planet of the Apes is because of the Chevy Nova branding.
I guess
from the car. That's it. They just retroactively made that so.
Yeah. But I like that they've kind of like undid what War for the Planet of the Apes did. But anyway, just a few things I wanted to throw out there as like observations before we wrap up today. Anything else to say about this movie?
I mean, I just want to point out, like, it just feels like everything was a step down. Like the VFX were a step down.
One other thing. In War for the Planet of the Apes, Caesar goes on a road trip with I think 3 other apes, and every single one of those apes looks very different.
Yes.
And I didn't like how the 3 apes in this movie looked extremely similar. Like,
I don't know, I could tell them apart.
Yeah,
but I think
they barely have any distinct characteristics, I think, other than that too. So that was a little bit of a. I wish they had been better developed in this 2.5 hour long movie. I would say.
Yeah. I think it's more, and this goes back to something Jeff said. Like I could tell them apart, but the faces just didn't have that same like clarity of visuals as the previous films, and there was just something about like. In the best moments of the previous films, I was like, clearly I'm like spying on these apes in their natural habitat. And this one, it was just like, I'm always watching a movie. Like I'm always seeing these animals in a CGI created location.
Agreed. All right. Well, anyway, I'm glad some of us found stuff to enjoy about it. It sounds like we're all pretty mixed about it, but it wasn't a terrible film or anything like that. It just could have been a lot better.
But it's doing well. It's doing incredibly well at the box office, apparently. Yeah. People want to see this more than Fall Guy. So, yeah.
And at the end of the day...
I have a lot of thoughts about that.
Yeah.
Well, before we wrap up, Roxana Hadadi, you want to let people know where people can find more of your work on the internet this week?
Oh, sure. You can find me at Vulture. You can still find me on X, and that's pretty much it.
All right. And I would strongly recommend you check out Roxana's work. She's one of my favorite writers on the internet. And
Thank you.
I always make sure to check out her articles at vulture.com. And at the end of the day, it is still really impressive that Wes Ball made a movie. Thank you so much for watching this video of the Filmcast. Check out these other videos that we have available, and be sure to hit like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon to get other videos from us in the future.
You can also go to thefilmcast.com to catch all of our audio podcast versions of all of our episodes.
And support this podcast at patreon.com/filmpodcast, where you can sign up for ad-free episodes and exclusive After Darks.
Thanks so much to everyone who makes the Filmcast possible.